The arts, now I normally say I don't comment, but on Greek art I do want to comment on extensively. Greek art strove for what we today would call realism. Now today our artists say, leave realism to the camera. Art is a matter of trying to show emotions like love and hate, fear, or even greed. We try to depict things that the camera will not show. But the Greeks would pride themselves on saying, I can construct a statue of an apple that is so real looking that a deer will come up and lick it or try to gnaw on it and eat it. And again, realism was the goal, to try to make their subject look so real that you couldn't tell them from the fake. And in their depiction of their gods, they depicted their gods with perfect human bodies. Now, hey, when I was in the 6th grade, I was once asked, why do the Greeks always show their gods naked? And I could not answer. The reason was their gods supposedly had the ideal body. Now, where this became important in the 20th century, a German man said, I have seen the man of the future, and he looks like the old Greek gods with a perfect body. And all right, the Superman comics that started in the 1930s depicted a man with supposedly the ideal perfect body with a broad shoulders, a narrow waist, and a huge bulging biceps. Now I had a pupil ask me, who's to say that that's a perfect body? I have to agree. I mean, who's to say that that's the ideal body? But the Greeks depicted, basically, Superman was a copy from the Greek gods. And the man I'm talking about, the 20th century German man, was Adolf Hitler, who tried to picture a future where that every male would have the body of the Greek gods, or basically the body of Superman. And every female, perhaps the body of Lois Lane. I mean, and folk, it's an ideal that's just impossible to achieve. And it's just, I've seen the man of the future, and the planet Krypton was what Hitler depicted as a future where that all the men were supermen, and all the men were scientists, and all the women were also scientists themselves, where that everybody was a genius, and there were no slow people among them, no obese, no cripples. Everybody was perfect. Again, an ideal that's just impossible to achieve. All right, now when I was a kid, yes, I used to read the Superman comic books, and they featured a man called Charles Atlas. Have any of you ever heard of him? All right, one of you, Charles Atlas, said, I can build a body like this, and it'd have two pictures, one before and one after. And try as you might, I would look at the befores and after the magnifying glass, and I couldn't tell. They were accused of hiring two different models. The one was, the before was someone who was either too skinny or too fat, and the after was a different model entirely. But they say, this is what I was before, and 7 weeks later, here I am. Charles Atlas claimed he could create a perfect body and win the title of the world's most, but he said, I can't guarantee you'll win the title of the world's most perfectly developed man like I did, but I can guarantee that in 7 weeks I can build your body. And being a young person, I think, hey, well, that's for me. But I never did send my $5 off, and never did. A lot of those books are still in circulation. He believed in what he called dynamic tension, what we call today isometrics. Today we know that motion is better than isometrics for building muscle, but also we also know if you don't have the genes, you can't build the body. You have to have the genetic material to begin with. And try as you might, no matter how much you exercise certain muscles, if the genes were not there at birth, you're not going to develop them. I did have a pupil at this point say, oh, you can develop anything you try, believe it if you want to. I mean, I could only dream of being a Major League Baseball player. The fact of the matter was the persons who make the team were born with that ability. Ted Williams would argue it. But then he had to quit playing when he turned 42 like everybody else does at some point. The body could no longer do what the mind told it to do. The Greeks also developed columns, and we have a lot of columns, and the book shows Doric, Ionic, Corinthian, different kinds of columns would hold the tops of the temples up. Now, Don't worry about the names, Cor. I mean, I'm not going to write them on the board. I'm not going to ask what the difference between a Doric or Iconic. I'm not going to show you a picture and say, what's this? I mean, well, don't worry about that. But what I do want you to remember was their temples. The roof was supported by columns, but they had no walls, which meant the interior of the temple was going to be the same temperature as the outside. And if the rain was blowing side to side, a really hard wind, the temple offered no protection for you except, well, maybe from the top. They did have a roof, but the temples had no walls as such, just columns that supported the roof. The Parthenon it lasted for 1,000 years, but in the 1600s, late 1600s, there was a war, and somebody stored gunpowder in the Parthenon. The gunpowder went off and blew up a large part of the Parthenon, and it never was repaired. So what we see today is a building that still stands a lot of its original majesty, but a lot of it has been blown up by one of our wars. All right. Now, to get to some of my favorite parts about Greek history, their philosophy. The book starts off well, with Thales. Thales tried to do what so many others before have tried to explain the universe. Thales said the underlying element that explains the whole universe is water. That water is what ultimately was what the universe started with, and then some of the water formed rock, and some of the water formed metal, and some of the water formed out. He might not have been too far off. Today's scientists will tell you that they believe that the original element was hydrogen. And if you know anything about water, it's 2 atoms of hydrogen mixed with 1 of oxygen, H2O. Again, I'm not talking Greek to you. Some of you are whatever they're talking about. But anyway, he believed that the underlying element was water. Pythagoras, the Pythagorean theorem, he believed that the essence of the universe could be found in 2 things, music and numbers. Now, if you know anything about music, folks, every 8th note in music repeats back the first note. You know, you have C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Now, do any of you know what I'm talking about? And elements, every 8th element is repetition of the first note, just like the notes of music. What's the connection? I don't know. And music, the next do up from do, re, mi, fa, sol, do is called an octave. From one C to another C is an octave. In the periodic table, you'll find octaves there also. Carbon, an octave up from carbon is silicon. Silicon has a lot of the same characteristics of carbon. And so on and so forth. Again, the Greeks hardly knew this, but some of their philosophy and science indicates that they might have had access to records that came from Egypt that made them figure things out. You wonder how in the world, it's like they didn't miss it by far, or maybe we missed it. Again, there have been many people try to explain the universe since. The most recent famous man to try to explain the universe, Einstein. Before him, there was Newton, who explained the universe in such a way that people would listen. I mean, everybody thinks they know how the universe runs, but I'm talking about people who could explain the universe and get others to listen to them. Before Newton, well, we'll talk about Thomas Aquinas. Before him, there was Plato. We'll talk more about Plato in a little bit. The sophists came along, and they said, oh, we can't explain the universe. To do so is foolish. And both again, I must say, how much of that can I agree with? Well, try as we might, some scientists will tell you today that they believe there's some things that we don't have an explanation for, and we're not going to explain. I'm not saying it's foolish. The sophists, I think, went too far, but we have to there's some things about this universe we live in that simply we cannot. But anyway, the sophists said it's foolish to try to explain the universe because it's just simply beyond us. I at least say we can at least try. But anyway, that's me. they believed that what we should try to do was just simply understand ourselves. Particularly the sophists were engaged in rhetoric. The Greeks were excellent speech makers. Now, folks, I want to give you an example of rhetoric. In American history, there were two men who lived in Virginia at the same time, and they knew each other, even liked each other. They were the two men, Patrick Henry and Thomas Jefferson. Now, listen to Patrick Henry. I tell you, our chains are already forged. You can hear their clanking on the plains of Boston. Thomas Jefferson. He has overturned our legislators. He has taxed us without our consent. No, the one man was rhetoric. The other one was substance. Excuse me. Overdid my vocal cords there. Patrick Henry was rhetoric. Thomas Jefferson, substance. The Greeks believed that the way to persuade people was be a rhetorician, appeal to the emotion. What's that? The what? Something like that, yeah. Appeal to the emotion. Whereas Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, he just touched specifically. Now here's what King George III is doing to us. He's imposed governors on us. He has sent judges on us, all without our consent. He's imposed taxes on us without our consent. He's taken our people to be tried in England, far from home, where they can't have any witnesses from their own country. He has done all this to us. Patrick Henry, we're going to be enslaved, folk. You can hear the chains of slavery clanking on the plains of Boston. Rhetoric.